Demand for Joe. Take a project, bro. Forget it, I do it matter. Forget about the big things, so say make we talk about the small things, so.
Has over 100 million citizens off the grid and more than any other country in the world. And even where the grid could be available, guys, the supply is very unpredictable. They bring it now, they take it out in the next minute. But we need to really go beyond complaining, NEPA, to like doing something about it. And that's why Power Solutions is here. And I've been joined by two gentlemen. First, my co-host, Wiebe Boer. Great guy. He's joining us live now via Skype. Wiebe, how are you?
I'm good.
Great. I can hear you loud and clear. Fantastic. So, you do the honors. I told them a lot about you already. I told them even some of your statements. You once said that every day should be Women's Day. I just told them, just in case. But let's get into it. We have a special guest. It'll be nice for you to introduce our amazing guest today as we start Power Solutions.
All right, you bet. So our guest today is Trey Jarrard. He's the CEO of Renewvia Solar. Renewvia is an American solar company, and we have an American guest calling in from Atlanta today.
Wow!
In honor of July 4th weekend.
Hi.
So Trey, happy 4th of July. What were the celebrations like this year? It must have been a bit different.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much. They were a bit subdued. The large gatherings in public places that people are accustomed to with the fireworks were pretty much all canceled. But it was a little bit nice. The neighborhoods were full of energy, which is the way I remembered it growing up. So when people used to spend time in the backyards with family and doing less planned events, is what really happened this year, which was actually kind of nice. It's the way I remember doing it growing up. You didn't feel like you had to be going somewhere and paying for something to do something special. You just enjoyed it with your family.
Great. Looks like a great celebration over there. But let's get back to, Power Solutions conversation. What's your background, Trey, by the way? Hi to you. How did you end up in the solar sector?
My background is varied. I actually started with a biotechnology company, a company that made devices to treat your heart if it wasn't beating correctly, and I did that for several years, and it led me into the mid 90s, and it seemed like everybody between the ages 18 and 30 in the mid 90s was working for a company with a .com behind it. This weird proliferation, this thing called the internet was happening, and it was kind of taking over the world. So I was one of those people. Worked for an internet company and benefited from that. It was one of the few that I guess kind of made it through the hype and actually did something afterwards. But that was a good experience. Taught me a lot. It led me to a private equity group, which is kind of it's taught me how to value companies, raise capital, start companies, acquire them, and grow them. I did that for a lot of years, and it kept me moving around constantly. And when we sold our portfolios of technology companies, gave me a chance to kind of look around a little bit, to decompress. I had a young family at the time, and look around and decide what I wanted to get involved in, and something that actually I felt like made a difference. I made a couple of investments in the renewable space, and ended up wrapping a company around the investments and taking as much advantage as we could from the tax benefit that had been enacted in 2007. So that's how Renewvia started in the U.S. And we bounced around to the various states that had the most aggressive incentives and learned how to develop solar, everything from what kind of products to buy to how to work with corporations.
Wow, great.
So just to jump on that, so you started in the U.S. You initially focused just on the U.S. market. And how has that market evolved over the years? I know in the U.S. it sort of comes up and comes down, I guess, depending on the administration to some extent. But is solar a pretty common choice for an American business or household now?
It is now. The massive price decrease has really propelled all three sectors, being utility, residential, and commercial. So when this tax credit was enacted, it was kind of architected to give a single-digit return. But with the price drop, now it's high in the double digits. So that, coupled with the decrease in the perceived technology risk from the corporations and the residential section, has really propelled the market in the U.S. and grown it substantially.
I really would like to know what made you decide to get into the solar business in Africa, Trey, and why mini-grids in particular?
Well, this, again, to go back to this tax credit, it was set to sunset and expire around 2016 initially. So we started looking for markets that worked independent of incentives. We landed in Latin America and some of the South Pacific islands originally, but we're introduced to a commercial project in Nairobi originally for our first project in sub-Saharan Africa. And we were focused on the same sector we were in the U.S., but we were asked to perform a solar microgrid feasibility study in Kenya, partially funded by the U.S. TDA, a division of the U.S. government. So that's what opened our eyes to the need in the off-grid space and also the overall commercial opportunity, and it really kind of turned our focus to that particular sector.
Wow.
Okay, and so you didn't end up going to Latin America, is that what you're saying? You just went to Africa?
We worked in Uruguay in Latin America for 2 years, working on a utility scale project there, and developed it and all the way to fruition, and worked with a Spanish and Chinese company in development of it. Okay,
all right. So now back to Africa. So you said you came into Africa initially sort of on a commercial project. Then you had some USTDA funding and did some feasibility studies. But in the end, you seem to have picked the toughest places imaginable, almost the toughest places imaginable in Africa to kick off. Both the Victoria Islands in Lake Victoria, sorry, not Victoria Island, but islands in Lake Victoria in East Africa. And then the Niger Delta in Nigeria. So what pushed you in that direction? I mean, most, solar companies would find a nice, easy project maybe in Lagos or Nairobi or Accra, and you chose these pretty difficult to get to locations. What was the background to that?
Well, we during this feasibility study, several of the sites that were evaluated were in the counties that made up some of the islands on Lake Victoria. So we were very familiar with them. But then more importantly than that, we felt that from what we knew about the space and then knowing what the financing challenges, we felt it was important to demonstrate success in an area that was of the highest need. The islands had no eligibility at all for grid extension ever. KPLC wasn't going to show up and put generators on the islands. And then also from the standpoint of demonstrating that we could do this, we know that we could demonstrate we could build solar on top of a warehouse in New Jersey, but we needed to show other stakeholders that we could execute in very remote areas and logistically challenging areas. So for those reasons, we decided to start with the more challenging, some of the most challenging remote areas that were in need.
All right, good. In case you...
So that was in East Africa though, but then how come in Nigeria you chose the Niger Delta?
Oh yeah, well, some of the same reasons. So our country manager, Chris Ebaware, is from Warre, and he was very well connected and very, very much understood the need in a lot of the remote areas in the Niger Delta. So he educated us on why he felt like this was the best place for us to start. And some of the same reasons, some of the same proof of concept, proof of ability reasons we did that in the islands in East Africa. We wanted to start our endeavor in Nigeria in some of the remote communities in the Niger Delta.
Well, if you're just joining us, you're listening to Nigeria's number one for talk, Nigeria Info 99.3, and we are on Power Solutions. We're having a conversation with the CEO of Renewvia. He's Trey Jarrard, and he's talking to us about his solar solution right here. And most people hear about value-adding outfits like yours, and they don't get to hear the story. So it'd be nice to hear from you, Trey. Tell us about the journey of setting up an operation here in Nigeria. Has it been more or less complicated than what you found in East Africa?
It's been similar. I mean, I think we benefited from our experience in East Africa, understanding some of the corporate compliance and regulation and setting up a new entity. But this USTDA grant was really helpful in mitigating some of the risk entering new markets for a small company like ours, and to give us confidence to initially risk our capital as well as confidence to convince others to risk theirs. So Nigeria was as straightforward as anywhere that we set up new operations. I mean, corporate compliance is sometimes pretty much all the time challenging, and what we've learned is you need to identify good representation, and it can help guide you in those kind of the corporate compliance sector, and make sure that you stay within the lines.
Okay, pretty fair.
Okay. And then how did you pick your first two locations? I mean, I know you're doing mini grids planned for throughout the Niger Delta, but you picked two in Bayelsa. Again, not the obvious first choice. Oloibiri and Akipilai, I hope I'm pronouncing those right. And how did you pick those? And then how did you get the communities on board to be ready and willing to host your mini grids?
Well, again, we've a lot of guidance from our country manager, and I'll tell you one of the reasons why we landed on Oloibiri and Akipilai is some of these areas have no connectivity to disco or the grid, and for the most part aren't eligible for it in decades out. So and these communities were in specific Oloibiri were some of the are amongst the oil concessions. So intuitively one would think energy would be plentiful there, because you're one of the most known energy sources there, being oil, is coming from the area. But ironically, this community is not with power at all. They're only running off individual generators. So what led us there was the specific need of this particular community and Akipilai, and that it was a focus of an area where that it had been in the spotlight, being the first community where oil was discovered in Nigeria, yet it didn't have any power source. So that's what led us to originally starting with those two.
Well, a lot of Nigerians listening right now in Lagos and across the country, those who are joining online, will be wondering a few questions, and I hope my next line of questions would be able to answer some of the doubts. Tell us about the mini grids that are now operating. Like you mentioned that, of course, we've also mentioned that a mini grid's operating. And how did they work? And, what does it mean to the community? And what are some of the examples of impact, just so people can have the scope of what's going on with the mini grids?
Yeah, the mini grids are comprised of solar plus storage, being battery, and these two we have diesel backup, because this isn't a perfect science yet. I mean, we're measuring what we believe is the demand of the community the best we can. But right now, these communities have been running off individual generators or sometimes community generators. And we wanted to make sure that our power systems performed per the community expectations, which is why we put a diesel backup. We don't want to be in the diesel business, but we want to perform for the stakeholders and make sure that that we're providing a satisfactory service. So the majority of the power is generated from the sun, and what excess power we have during the day that's not consumed is stored, and then the community uses that at night. Some of the impact, the biggest impact that we felt right away is productivity increases. A lot of, whether it's an individual with a small commercial enterprise or residential, if you're having to wait for power from a community generator, or if you're having to wait for fuel for a small generator that's powering your house, and sometimes it doesn't work and sometimes fuel is not available, you can accomplish what you need right then, and it's a costly endeavor to have to wait. So having affordable and reliable power ready 24/7 is extremely impactful in that regard, and that leads to increased savings and increased income for businesses and savings for individuals, which leads to improved quality of life. So that's one category. Another one is health. In Oliveri, there was a new health center that was just funded, and we're really excited and honored that our system is going to be powering that health center, which is very impactful for the community.
All right, I can see a couple of people sending messages already and asking some questions, but let me let Wiebe take the next one before I see if our audience have questions for you or Wiebe or anyone.
All right, good. So Trey, and how supportive has the Nigerian government been? I know there's some programs that they've put out there, but how helpful have they been to you? I mean, how supportive have they been with the Renewvia journey in Nigeria? Well,
the government's been great from regulation standpoint. I mean, this is the first country that a microgrid developer can actually forecast anything, really. The regulators have really moved out of the way. They've enacted regulation that allows permitting to be extremely efficient. So really, in essence, which is the important part, if you are in agreement with the community, which is really the most important part from the standpoint of who you are, how you're going to enact this, where you're going to put it, how you're connecting to the community, and what you're going to charge, then the regulators are saying that please develop. We need this. We need help from the private sector. So they listened to the private sector. They enacted regulation that allowed this to happen in an efficient manner and with some velocity. So they've been, the Nigerian government has actually got ahead of this and put some real thought into it and listened to the other stakeholders and put the structure in place to make this work.
All right, good. In case you're just joining again, we were just a moment. We are talking lighting up the Niger Delta. And we, of course, have this conversation with the CEO of Renewvia, and that's Trey Jarrard. And he said a whole lot about the mini grids. And I have a question here coming in via our WhatsApp portal saying, what is the capacity of these mini grids? And there are two questions actually, but you could respond to that first before I take the next one, before Wiebe comes on again.
Yeah, the capacity is generally designed around what the community need is. So the good thing, the most advantageous aspect of these mini grids is, unlike solar home systems, which do a lot of good and there's a place, the mini grids scale with the individual and the community. So if you start with a capacity that works, as lifestyle changes, as commercial entities change and businesses are started, the system simply scales. You add more panels, you add more battery, and you can accommodate whatever the load is. And the individual is not made to spend more money. They just buy more power as they need it. There's no upfront costs that they're having to put forth for additional materials or batteries. Okay. They don't have to manage materials that are broken or stolen sometimes. They just buy power when they need it.
Great. Fantastic. I think I will let Wiebe go now. But at the point where you talked about the supportiveness of Nigerians and the government, I think we needed to give a shake as to that. Well, this is what we call shekere. I don't know if you know what it is. You're probably meeting this for the first time. It's called shekere. So that's what we do when we try. If you've done well, we say well done to you. So maybe at the end of this conversation, I would do this for you. But this one is for Nigerians for being supportive. So Wiebe, you should have the next question.
I'm glad I got one.
Yeah, no. So Trey, I think just to build on that, it's important for listeners to hear this because I think we're often very negative about our government in Nigeria, and this is, one area where I feel like the Nigerian government has done really well, because there's also some funding, right, from the Nigerian electrification program.
Yeah, that's an extremely material part of this. So there's funding, and the Rural Electrification Association agency is working with World Bank, and there's a performance-based grant. So and it's allowing the developers to put forth these grids, develop the grids, and actually charge a price that works with the community. So the performance-based grants are absorbing a significant percentage of the overall capex, and the REA has been again, I keep using this word, but efficient, and to make this process happen in a way it's going to happen quickly and not over decades.
Mm-hmm.
All right, if you have a question, just maybe we'll take one or two calls. I see the phone lines buzzing, and we'll take just one or two comments from the audience listening. And you can call 0700 993 993 993, or you can just send us a tweet at Nigeria Info FM Lagos, and we would take your comment and your call. Well, let's wait for those calls to come in, as I can see they're being screened right now. My next question, of course, would be, what's next really for Renewvia, and where are your mini grids going up? What's next, indeed? I don't know if you got the question. What's next for Renewvia right now? All right, yes.
I didn't quite get that question.
Okay, what is next for Renewvia? Yeah, absolutely. What's next for you? Where else are your mini grids going up? What else? Do you have plans to have more of these mini grids in other parts of the country, the continent? What's next for you?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Okay, the connection dropped for a second.
Okay.
So we have an aggressive plan. We have a plan to build 1,000 microgrids.
1,000
in the next 7 years, and that might seem That might seem lofty, but the demand is there. According to what you're reading and what source you're looking at, just in Nigeria alone today, there's over 10,000 microgrids that are needed to support the demand in these remote communities. That doesn't include other countries. So in short, we have an aggressive plan, and we've been working on that for a few years now, and we want to build a large off-grid utility, and it's we want to build thousands of the microgrids, but specifically our plan includes 1,000 microgrids in the next 7 years.
All right, great. Wiebe, our time is fast spent already looking at it right now, so we should be wrapping up in just a moment. Before I take your last comments, let's just keep our word. Let's see who's on the line. Hi, good morning. Welcome to Power Solutions.
Good morning. My question to Mr. Wiebe is this. Considering how far the Niger government has spent in making sure that we have a reliable light in Nigeria, I want to ask, will he say that the government have done pretty well in making sure that we have power in Nigeria as it's supposed to be? Thank you very much.
Thank you. He's asking, considering the investments in making sure that Nigeria is lit up, would you say that the government has done pretty well?
All right, Trey, I'm not sure. Could you hear that?
I couldn't hear that.
Yeah, so the question was, considering the investments the Nigerian government is making in power, are they sort of on the right track? And I guess in your case, if you can speak from the off-grid perspective, not the on-grid.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're definitely on the right track. Again, the government was looking to the private sector to help solve this problem, and they're on a better track than anywhere in the continent.
Wow. That's quite impressive to say. Really, really impressive to hear. I know most Nigerians will be like, oh, really?
You need a shake.
Yes, absolutely. But I would want Trey to pronounce it the way we call it here. It's shekere. Shekere. Could you try that?
Shekere.
Great. Another one for you. So, gentlemen, our time is fast spent. I wish you could stay there all day. I mean, looking at your faces alone is inspiring, but we have to go. So, what will be your parting shots, both of you? Let me just let Wiebe take it from here, and then I just shut up.
So Trey, I mean, you're saying 1,000 mini grids for Renewvia in the next 7 years in Nigeria, correct?
Yes. Well, yes. 7 years in Nigeria and other places, but Nigeria has the highest growth projection simply because right now the structure that Nigeria has put in place.
All right. So I think that's very good news for us to end with, that Renewvia, and it's one of many countries that are looking at opportunities like this, are going to be lighting up hundreds and maybe up to 1,000 towns, small towns in all over Nigeria.
Wow.
With solar. So that even while everyone is so focused on fixing the grid, in many cases, it's going to be these sorts of off-grid communities that get power first. So thank you very much, Trey. Thank you for taking the risk and jumping into Nigeria, and also for being so excited and bullish about Nigeria. It's really inspirational, and I hope that you will be the first, and that many others will also follow and come in and try and do what you are trying to do. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, my pleasure. I can't wait to get back there. I'm looking forward to these travel bans being lifted.
Great.
All right.
That's it, Wiebe. Thank you again for being a part. Next week, we'll be here again with yet another interesting guest. So don't forget to join us at 11:30 for another episode of Power Solutions. Well, from this side is au revoir. On va se voir alors. In other words, bye for now. We'll see you some other time. Ciao.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Collins. Have a great week.
You too.
Thanks, Colin.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
So that's how much we have. Let's pick some bills. After that, you'll be listening to the news, and that will be it for me. Wouldn't you rather stay tuned? My name is Collins. Teke.